Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Nights of the Neurocareers Roundtable July already 25 edition. We have more than 110 participants signed up for our event, and it again shows that there is an interest in what we're doing. And our main goal for these events is to build a welcoming and informal space where we can exchange insights on neurotechnologies, education in the neurocareer space, career opportunities, entrepreneurial journeys, and visions of the future. And from neurosecurity to even science fiction storytelling, and of course exploring virtual reality, which we can see already here in our avatar.
Yeah.
I love the ear.
Oh, I like the hand too.
And we have absolutely wonderful program today for you. Of course, thank you for joining. And the main thing that we have here is live communication. So we want you to send your questions, to just give your comments on what you hear. Let's make this event really interesting and engaging. We will talk about the updates on brain-computer interfaces. We have Susan Boehnke, who will tell us about the key takeaways from the recent BCI Society meeting. Please welcome Susan.
Hello, everybody.
Hey.
I'm delighted to be here. Thanks for inviting me. I had
Thank you very much, Susan.
Yes. The delight to be on your podcast last year, and it was a great experience.
Yes, thank you. Yes, and actually we will have a podcast link so that anyone who is interested will be able to listen. And we will give introduction just a little bit later. I will just introduce everyone who is on the panel, and then we will start with introductions. Okay. We have the virtual reality guru here, Sam Hosowski. Sam.
Hi guys.
And
it's good to be here again. Second time for me as well.
Yes, and we'll have Sam's link to a podcast, and he is Biotech Strategist and creator of brain-computer controlled VR at uCat. So you will learn a lot about Sam today. We have also Violeta Tulceanu, a computer scientist and BCI and biometric system specialist. Yeah, welcome, Violeta.
Thank you.
Yes, and the last but not least, but very, very important part of our conversation, Dante Therese, a suspense science fiction author.
Hi.
Yes, hello, Dante. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Yeah.
Yes. So, welcome everyone to our roundtable, and thank you again all the panelists for joining us today. And let's give our introduction to our listeners, to our viewers today. Susan, Dr. Boehnke, would you like to start and give your introduction? Thank you.
For me?
Yes,
okay.
yes.
I guess I'll go first. Oh, well, it's delight to be here. So I'm Susan Boehnke. I'm an associate professor at Queen's University up in Canada. We're about in Kingston, Ontario, halfway between Toronto and Montreal on the beautiful Lake Ontario shores. And we have an amazing Center for Neuroscience Studies here at Queen's. That has a graduate program in neuroscience. It's been long running for 25 years or more. And I run the Neurotech Microcredential Program, which is an initiative I started during the pandemic with funding from the province of Ontario, which really addressed what I saw as a growing excitement among students who were participating in hackathons and student clubs, brain-computer interfaces and neurotech in general. And as a neuroscience professor, I was getting involved with these student clubs and saw that there was a real need for to fill gaps in knowledge. Students that were engineers or in physics didn't have the neuroscience understanding. Our neuroscience grad students didn't understand signal processing and how to do those hard skills and the coding. And so we thought, well, maybe we could create courses that could fill the gaps in those knowledge. And that was where the Neurotech Microcredential was born. So we now have many courses running. They're online asynchronous, so anyone from around the world can take them. And we have people from all over the world. And including non-students. In fact, more than half of our enrollees are working in industry or seeking to get into the neurotech industry.
Thank you very much, Susan. Very impressive, and I always recommend your courses to anyone who is asking me how I can get into neurotech. I say here, they are micro-credentials. Yes, you can take. So thank you very much for your introduction, Susan. And can somebody from virtual reality join your micro-credential program? Like we have today Sam Hosowski. Sam, can you introduce yourself, please?
Thanks, Milena. Hello, everybody. And Susan, I'm quite fascinated today to learn a lot about the Microcredentials program. My career into neurotech is far from traditional, so I've relied on a lot of extracurricular programs to educate myself. Neuromatch Academy, the BCI Spring School.
In fact, I'm colleagues with
attendees.
Gunnar Blom at Queen's, who was one of the founders of Neuromatch.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that is a movement, the Neuromatch Academy, of which ripples we still feel today. Yeah, there's many amazing people that came out of that. Well, okay, so this unorthodox journey into neurotech, I guess to summarize, like Milana said in the beginning, a biotech strategist would be a good summary. I started as a computer scientist. I was deeply fascinated ever since a young age by this question of, do minds have to run on biology necessarily? Or can we engineer substrate-independent minds? And I've always approached this from this perspective of a computer scientist, working at Carbon Copies Foundation for Substrate-Independent Minds as a computational neuroscientist to begin with, and I wrote my thesis, my master's thesis on a similar subject. Later on, I think the running theme of my career is something along the lines of designing systems that support biotechnology research. I have done that in startup worlds of creating lab automation tools for very big biological labs that usually share equipment. Later on, build a software as a service product for clinical trials labeling, so compliant labeling to avoid any kind of mislabeling or false claims that make it onto bottles. I ensured that is prevented through a rather complicated system. And then fast forward, I suppose, to today, I decided that the semi-corporate world was not really for me. And I was looking through this list of technologies that could get us closer to understanding the brain. High-density electrophysiology was towards the top. And it happens that there are a few companies, few startups that pursue this very seriously with enormous amount of funding. I speculate is about 1/3 of the total neurotech device investment has gone into a handful, about a dozen electrophysiology companies. And I was questioning whether their products that they're going to introduce to markets really make sense for the initial patient population, whether they really offer something that's beyond the assistive technologies that these typically severely paralyzed patients currently have access to. And I started uCat to try to create more value for these first users. The fundamental supposed thesis that we're testing through this project uCat is whether you can decode from the motor cortex the whole body movement intentions from somebody who has been locked inside of their bodies by paralysis. And then when you can decode those, can you interpolate? So can you map those decoded intentions onto the joints of virtual avatars and have people who are completely paralyzed in real life be fully expressive in their virtual life, and whether that's meaningful? So those are the kinds of questions that I investigate nowadays.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
That is amazing. And I see already Dante just booming
Yeah.
with excitement. Dante, what do you think of that? Thank you very much, Sam, for your introduction. You are doing amazing things. Dante, what are your thoughts? And also, can you introduce yourself? Thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Dante Therese. I write suspenseful fiction with a side order of science. And I have to say, Sam, that I found what you said like really interesting, especially since as most writers who work day jobs, I did work for quite a while as a cook in a nursing home. So I did get to meet people who were paralyzed. And it was just really interesting that no two cases of that are really alike. And that, I had always, when growing up, I had always thought of paralysis as rigidity. But in a lot of, actually, most of the people I met, paralysis was just like a rag doll. Like the left side of their body was just like this limp rag doll that they couldn't control. And so that, that's just interesting that you could, allow them to be reanimated on their online life and stuff. I know so many of them that I worked with and met would really have enjoyed that, especially the gamers, but hopefully your research could also provide an avenue into, reanimating those people. And but with my writing, I have a series out, this is the book one. It's called The Base. And basically, The Base is about the most notorious military research lab in the world, where the top scientists from all these organizations get together and they collaborate on a project. And I was inspired a lot by neuroscience in this. The military gives sort of a checklist of attributes that the device has to have. And one of those attributes that I wanted the device to have was instincts. They start the device out as an organic thing, but then they breed out the organic, and because they don't want it to be biodependent, and they make it synthetic. So, but I wanted the attributes of instincts to still be passed along. And I found a really cool neuroscientist, Bianca Jones Marlin. I looked at some of her research where she just had mice and she had them have an unpleasant situation when they simultaneously experienced the scent of almond. And she found in one generation, first of all, the mice adapted. They had more olfactory senses and receptors to the almond scent. But their next generation that was born also had those receptors. So it was really interesting to me about instinct and self-preservation and trauma and how that rewires your brain, not just for you present day now, but for your offspring. So thank you for having me, and I'm really glad to be around folks who like to think.
Thank you.
It's good for you.
Thank you. And we have people here already commenting. Jafet Kanis, I am happy to be joining this engaging event, he is saying. Then we have also another LinkedIn user. It's just the name is not shown here, but I think it is Zarna Grandi, CTO at Mimic, senior full stack developer, and she is saying good afternoon to all the panelists. Yes, so wonderful. And we have also Louise Baker here. And Louise is just in awe from what she hears. So thank you very much again to all the panelists for joining, for wonderful introductions. And maybe we can start talking a little bit about what's happening in your field. the field that you represent here. And maybe who would like to start? I know that Susan, she just recently visited.
I think we need
Excuse
Violeta.
me, excuse me, Mileta.
Yes.
I don't think we've done Violeta yet.
Yes,
Unless,
I'm
Yeah.
keen to hear about Violeta.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. You know, I will be honest, I'm always nervous. I've done so many events, but at each event, I am nervous. I will be very, very transparent with that. And sometimes things happen to me because of my nervousness. I apologize for that, Violeta. Yes, and I wanted to connect actually what was said, and especially virtual reality. Yes, if we're reanimating people in the virtual world who cannot do certain things or even talk. Yes, we need to ensure that things are done securely, that it's that person is speaking and doing things and not somebody else's, yes, under their avatar. So in so many ways, Violeta, what you do is so important. So can you please introduce yourself and also tell us about the relevance that you see with those people who are already here on the panel? So thank you so much, Violeta. Mhm.
Thank you so much for giving me the floor. The last is the least, the best. I'm a neuroscientist and a cryptographer, so I'm an interdisciplinary neuroscientist. I have a background in defense, in cryptography, and I also do neurolinguistics and a bit of ethics and a bit of philosophy. It ties into the starting project, which is brainwave authentication. We are creating brain signatures that are a bit further than the pure EEG signal. We try to use your mind as a proof of existence. So it's based on memory, on emotion, and that cascades into a lot of neurolinguistics research, because to create a print from a memory, you have to understand how that memory is remembered. And then there comes the entire exceptions, as Sam was saying, right? You can have paralysis, but what if that paralysis comes from a stroke? You have Alzheimer, it's not sudden. You can have substance intake, you can have borderline. And when you're talking about neurosecurity right now, you're not talking anymore like 10 years ago when I started about, oh, we want to use it as a password to get into our email. It's absolutely not about that. It is about accessibility. It is about access control while taking into account cognitive and emotional state. It is about being able to sign with your brain. But as Dante was saying, right, military, bingo. I have spent a bit of time in those spaces at NATO to
Mhm.
be precise. And well, yes, right now the brain, it is described as the new battlefield, and there are a lot of neurotechnologies developed for the military. And you can have torture, you can have radicalization, you can have the use of neurotechnologies for advanced interrogation. And it gets so shaky. You can be profiled in the situation of an institutional abuse, and they happen. You can be profiled as you're unstable, you're too much, you are this, that, whatnot, especially if you need to be silenced. And yeah, your brainwaves can be used to create a black box diagnosis. So, yeah, you want to be able to sign. And if someone says, we took this data with EEG, we have pre-diagnosis, or we think we see this, we see a recognition reaction to an image. You had a P300, right, but was it under torture? Was it with consent? And does that data even come from me? Because the entire neurotechnologies, and companies might not like it when I say it, but I am a cryptographer and no system is secure. None of them is secure. Right now, there is no secure neurotech on the market because all of them either in the design or in the equipment or in their supply chain or in the legislation, they have big flaws, and we did security analysis on this. So when you're talking about brain prints, right now you are talking about defending personal freedom, personal integrity. And of course, in the context of decentralized identity and Sam Altman and things, yes, it is you put it on this stage. It is the it thing. They are trying iris and I think voice. Right, you do want proof of continuous presence. But what does that mean? What is a self? How is it tied to the physical? I create mind prints. So you have to take into account the shiftiness of the mind, the ambiguities, the flood of emotion. So the foundation is a neuroontology. It's a large corpus, which I have not published yet, but I am publishing it. And it's 500 hours of EEG that I have collected by myself over 2 years. I've led a team of 30 people. Right now, we are at the gateways of publishing it. Meanwhile, since I haven't opened my mouth on camera, I also, I rebelled. I have eloped from Leuven, I think. And I'm not saying yet where I'm eloping to. I'm eloping. I have eloped, left the building and entering elsewhere. Finance has something to do with it. But the publications will stay, the corpus will be staying under my name. It is my original work. It is not like anything on the market or that has been published, and it constitutes, so just the main experiment was done over 2 years, but I have historically 10 years of data because I've collected it over 10 years on different populations. The last thing to say, of course, you have the other neurotech, the implantables and the wearables of many sorts, which are also important. I worked on breaking into brain implants and trying to induce pain. Mostly, it's not about their security because it's non-negotiable, okay? You have to gravitate. You have either they work or they are secure, but it's also what you can do with them. Again, in the context of military and defense, you don't necessarily want to kill someone. You don't necessarily want to drain their data. You might want to embarrass them a little. Again, institutional abuse, think political abuse. You might want to make someone look bad by whichever means. So this is why neurosecurity is important. And finally, if we're talking neurosecurity, the financial side is, it is emerging as a new internet of the minds. And for you, Dante, there's going to be a lot of writing to do. You have plenty of material because we're entering a blended consciousness type of era.
Yes.
We also want to do transactions. So my brainwaves might be used for training on a democratic BCI. They stay there, they get profiled, they get used, while I am putting my consciousness in contact with entities that try to sell stuff to me. If we introduce the bidirectional BCIs, of which we can go from TMS to new stuff, then the blended consciousness becomes much stronger. We're not even asking anymore, is this a signal that came from my brain and it was tampered with or forged? It's a signal that could have been written in my brain and got extracted. So
maybe we can just clarify for the audience that this isn't happening right now. But
sorry?
That this isn't really happening at the moment. We don't have widespread adoption. I mean, there's only so many people that have implanted BCI right now and in controlled clinical trials.
Well, I mean, I'm talking from this perspective of a researcher and potentials. I mean, of course, it's not.
Yeah, so certainly in the future. And this is a possible direction.
But the military is always about a decade ahead of what is noticeable to everyone else, really. There's a lot that goes on behind closed doors. So if you can sort of perceive this and talk about it and brainstorm it, be assured that they've been doing that for a while too. It may not be widely commercially available. Like drones were not really acknowledged until, a couple of years after they had been all over the place, and some other things like that. But, rest assured, I mean, if we're talking about it now, they may have been implementing it for a while.
Well, I mean, certainly, many of the neurotech companies like Synchron were originally founded or funded by DARPA. So there is no doubt that the American military has interest in this.
Yeah.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Violeta, for your introduction. We have Jafet commenting that's so interesting to know about neurotech security. I agreed with you, Violeta. So we have that. And we have also Jaime Riasco Salas, who also was our podcast guest, and actually he is saying that he's looking forward to meeting me in Argentina. And why I am mentioning this, because there is a very nice conference for the whole South America in computational neuroscience that will be coming in November 12-14. It's a LAWCN, LAWCN 25. I will post a link, so anybody who is interested, it's a wonderful opportunity. There is a very nice representation of neuroscience, neurotech specifically, and of course computational neuroscience, a great way to learn. There will be workshops, there will be wonderful talks from one of the best specialists in the field, so I highly recommend. Thank you very much, Jaime, for reminding about that. Thank you, and great to see you joining our event. So thank you, everyone. And who would like to talk about what's happening in the field? Like I started talking already, that Susan attended the Brain-Computer Interface Society event, and I asked her actually to bring the insights from it and my learnings. Main learnings from it. Maybe Susan, would you mind sharing that? I think that would be a great start to a conversation.
I'd love to. It was a glorious conference, and one of the best I think I've been to in many years. Maybe I will try to. Oh, does not work. Chrome window. Maybe I can share my screen and show some pictures. Sorry, I'm just trying to figure out how to share.
Yes, so it is just
that work?
In the middle. Let me see. It should. Yes. Now I need just to reopen it. Yes. Here it is.
Can I? Did that work?
Wait.
Yes. I think everyone should see it. Yes, BCI Society highlights.
Oh, awesome. Oh, so it was a spectacular conference. Of course, it was in the most beautiful place on earth, Banff, Alberta, at the Art Center there. So our classroom was literally, this was the view we had from outside outside of the main halls. And just to highlight just how much beautifulness there was there, we had many hikes, and there were literally elk walking all around the space.
Oh, wow.
Of course, we weren't just there for socializing and going on beautiful hikes. We were there for the science. And maybe I just made a quick list of some of the highlights for me. Really, it was interfacing with major scientists, especially from the implantable BCI companies like Synchron. I got to meet Tom Oxley, who I think is just amazing, and from Neuralink and Paradromics and more. And they said that this was the most industry representation they probably ever had at the BCI Society. So that was a big shift. And there was many talks about how that industry is going, standards and such things. Also, like just walking around and meeting people like Jonathan Wolpart and Brendan Allison, who are like long-term BCI people, President Mariska Van Stensel, who is just a wonderful human. And we also had workshops where we got to meet BCI users, in particular, kids with disabilities who were benefiting from BCI. I got to participate in a workshop on neuro law where we actually participated in a mock court case that really was centered around workplace surveillance with neurotech. There was also every night industry-sponsored campfires where we had a beer with our fellow attendees. There was also an after party with Open BCI, which got broken up at 2 a.m. I can tell you all about that.
Yes, Susan, can you just interrupt you for a moment? Are you trying to show different slides? Because I don't see any. Yes. Okay.
Oh, did it go?
No.
Now it did, but it.
I think I tried to. Sorry, I think I went to. Sorry, I tried to share my. I tried to do a slideshow, but I guess it didn't work. That's okay. We'll just do it this way then.
Okay.
So yes, I was just going through my list of exciting things that happened. One of the reason I was there largely, I had a booth there where I was representing the Neurotech Microcredential Program. I was also representing our Connected Minds research program. This is a federally funded Canada First Research Excellence program called Connected Minds, Neural and Machine Systems for a Healthy, Just Society. This is a research collaboration between York University and Queen's University that really looks at the intersection between neurotechnology, AI, and other intelligent technologies and their effect on society. So looking at transdisciplinary research program, looking at the intersection of neurotech, neuroscience, AI, and society. And we sponsored the neuroethics session at the BCI Society. And as head of the training committee, I went and represented Connected Minds there. And what was amazing was that it was all on BCI abandonment issues. So this is something that's very timely. There's been a number of cases where companies have started clinical trials for implantable BCIs. The most famous case would probably be Second Sight, which is a retinal implant company that had implanted many, many people, that had given them some degree of sight. And during COVID, they went bankrupt. And the whole place went dark. Nobody had access to get them explanted. Nobody had access to get them upgraded or repaired. And that took a long time to sort out. So and there's other examples as well of trials having to end and people not wanting to have their brain-computer interface explanted. There's a really nice write-up about a case from Australia of a woman who had epilepsy, and she was part of a trial where she was able to have a BCI that allowed her to predict when she was going to have a seizure. And this gave her a huge amount of freedom in her life. She was finally able to leave the house without fear of having a seizure. And then she was forced to explant at the end of the trial. And this was, again, another example of a challenge. And she really felt she had really sort of bonded with her device, and it had changed her personhood. And therefore, being forced to remove it was really something that went very much against her autonomy. And anyways, the discussion here with the neuroethics session was on BCI abandonment. What can be done about this? And Judy Illes, who's the head of Neuroethics Canada, took this opportunity to actually introduce her vision of having a no-fault insurance plan for trial participants, where there would be a fund that companies would have to pay into. And in the event of an adverse reactions or injuries, or the company goes bankrupt, that there would be a fund that would take care of the patients. So this has now just been published in Science. Look that up if you like. That was Judy Illes is the senior author for that. So it was very exciting. We sponsored this, and it was an incredible event. Jennifer French from the Neurotech Network was there. She is a patient advocate. And it was moderated by Judy Traveris from OCAD University in Toronto, who's very much about co-creation and design. So that was a highlight, certainly for me. What else did we have at the BCI Society that was exciting? Of course, there's just our booth there up in the top left, interfacing with our industry partners like NIREX, and incredible poster sessions where I got to meet a lot of trainees. It was a very trainee-focused conference. It was lovely to see. And the other thing we got to do, we developed a pop-up studio where we did videos with founders. And this is my TA, Catherine McIntosh, who is training to be a neurosurgeon shortly. Wow. And that was actually a blast. So if you want to see those videos and founder stories from people like Connor from OpenBCI, feel free to reach out or join the courses. So those will be implemented into our new 2 new courses we have coming out: Ethical Considerations in Neurotech, which should launch in September, and Neuro Entrepreneurship that will launch later in the fall. And I think that's all I'm going to do. Now I have to figure out how to stop sharing. There. Does that work? There we go.
Yes,
that's my BCI Society update.
Yes, it worked. Susan, thank you so much. Which main trends in neurotech are you seeing, judging from this conference?
Well, tons of posters and talks about advanced decoding mechanisms of BCI signals in order to actually have them be used for effectors, kind of like what you're doing, Sam, as I read about your interfaces. And but also this really increased focus on these big implantable neurotech companies. This is growing. The amount of money going in now, I mean, is pushing $2 billion of investment into that. So I guess there's a lot of discussion too about what companies should be thinking of as their customers. So one of the messages that I took forth from the ethics panel was talking about this case of Second Sight. They had vastly overestimated the number of users that their company could potentially reach. They say that they thought that 50% of blind people would be interested in this. It was only 10% of what they had estimated actually were willing to do this. So how important it is to actually do that co-creation with your target customer and end user, and make sure that the device you're making is actually going to be of use to them. And this would be something that would mitigate these failures that other happen in trials and when companies have to shut down. So the message is that people should make sure they do their homework well in advance of starting a trial.
Yeah. Any questions, comments? Yes, please, Sam. Yeah.
So I really enjoyed the ethical considerations here, and I have some really practical questions. I wonder what your thoughts are on it, as well as the other panelists, because I think it cuts across the whole panel here. One of the things you were mentioning, so I'll just list them out and we can come back to it. So on abandonment, one of the hypotheses I have been discussing with the BCI companies is whether there should be a regulatory requirement for any already implanted system to mandatorily release all of their documentation and their software code as open source public assets in the event of bankruptcy. So that was one question.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a big one, so I guess we can stop at that.
And this is tied up with IP, right? And so I guess what I didn't know that I learned at the conference was that when Second Sight went bankrupt, they couldn't do anything with until the IP had been effectively transferred to another owner, and then that owner could take over and take care of the people that were implanted, and that took time. So long as everything is patented, I guess it's this conflict between patenting or making things open source. If you're going to have a business model, patents are there for a reason, right? While open source is what everybody would love to aspire to, there's challenges, I guess, with that in a business model.
This is exactly the limitation, is that, a bankruptcy may look like a complete dissolution of a company, but in fact, it's a business decision. It's a transaction of selling off your assets for whatever value you can retrieve.
Yeah.
But it's absolutely not mandatorily, it's not mandated to support an existing patient participant base or user base. And that's the unique thing in medical devices. And I just wondered whether we could impose that, whether, I know it's already difficult to bring a medical device product to market, average cost $50 to $100 million per device.
Right. And if you think about what the cost to get that patent, to just be told, and when you're going bankrupt and you're trying to salvage whatever money you can get out of that company, to lose your patent by making it have to be open source, I'm not sure how that would work. Is that what you're thinking?
That's it's the ethical question, is whether a protection of the company's rights to their assets is more important than the lives of the people who have implanted devices.
And that was Judy Illis's suggestion of having the no-fault insurance plan. So that would be protecting companies, but also protecting the patients.
And would you mind expanding on that a bit? What I know there's a publication you listed.
Yeah, the publication just came out in
insurance?
Science. I can look that up and pop it in the chat. I mean, there's complications with this plan, but I think it is novel and innovative. I mean, there's only so many ways that we can balance this ethics of making sure that patients are and their needs are taken care of without stifling innovation. Because if we made it too challenging, companies wouldn't want to invest, right? And yet we want to see this field grow, and that is certainly, there's been benefit to the field of having big companies come in and get involved. So we wouldn't want to stifle that by overregulation, but you need to have, obviously, patient protection at the very least. So how do we do that in a balanced way? So what Judy and her team had proposed was this no-fault insurance plan. The details obviously haven't been worked out in tremendous detail, but this would look something like every company that has a trial or implants any patient, for every patient implanted, there's a certain amount of money put into the pool. This is similar to what they do in the US for the vaccine injury fund. So every time anybody gets a vaccine in America, some pennies go into a fund, and that fund, the very, very tiny proportion of vaccinated people that actually indeed have an injury can then access that fund. So that would be the same kind of thing in principle.
I suppose then, there's a plethora of questions that springs out of that. Who manages the fund? At which events are we able to access it, etc. But like you said, details to be worked out. I'll be curious about the publication. It's an awesome resource.
I'll look it up
ties
right
into
now. I'll drop it in the chat.
into the second question, which was also you hinted at this aspect of, is the implanted device a part of oneself? Is that an extension of myself? And when that use case of a patient having it forcefully removed impacted their sense of self, I think that is another very important ethical consideration. Is like, if you rely on this for epilepsy detection, say, and it justifies your normal activities of daily living, does the technology, even though it's silicon based, constitute do your rights to your functional parts of your body extend to that functional part of that technology? And then in that case, do you just, like if you have health insurance, do you require to have an engineer maintenance insurance to come and look at the device that you've been implanted?
Yeah, really.
I think those questions are going to be soon addressed.
Yeah, so I mean, this was the case that Boehnke had written about, and his team, a woman in Australia who had merged with her device, and it had become part of who she was, and she argued, and she tried to fight through the courts to be able to maintain her device. What do we do when something you're profoundly changed in a way by merging with your device? Is it ethical to have it removed? But then if not, who's going to take care of it? who's responsible? And who decides? These are questions that we hope to have our students debate in our ethical considerations in neurotech course that's forthcoming.
Yes, yeah, that is amazing. And really very, very important questions, especially now when we see such an explosion, yes, in neurotech development and so many startups that are just popping out everywhere. So we really need to take care of those ethical issues. And we have a question which says, I'm curious about what the panelists think about AGI and its future role in neurotech. I'm not sure what is meant by AGI. Maybe somebody on the panel knows what.
That would be artificial general intelligence.
Oh, okay. Yes.
It's okay. I would be taking the question to begin with, if that's okay with the panelists.
Yes, absolutely.
I'm most allowed to have tentative thoughts because I run a startup, and I'm an avatar. I'll begin with the speculative thoughts. I think something I want to put into perspective is that we have had, say, extensions of one's cognitive capabilities. Let's put it simply, knowledge base, manifest through technologies already throughout the years. Now with AGI, say we can call it LLM for now. We have had an interface to a global knowledge base, which is incredibly fast. It's text-based, and it's finger outputted, in some case speech outputted, and then sensory inputted. The question is if we can minimize the disconnection between these massive, in this case, large language models. What would that mean? And I wanted to put into perspective just one, I guess, observation of in this implanted BCI space, where it may be the first time that we are connecting a biological neural network on the level of single spiking neurons to an artificial neural network on the level of single spiking neurons, with as little intermediary external behavior as possible. And that has massive implications. There is the fact that we're doing read only for now is great, at least in these high density BCI applications. But once we start doing write, so say invoke sensory percepts, it's a whole different ballgame, because some of these unobserved latent states that the neural network may want to nudge us towards may very much affect our current psyche, our current perception of the world, and change who we are. That's something that's not addressed at all, and it's something I always talk about with researchers building these ANNs. Just for context again here, we have, say, take Neuralink as a thread, as one of their threads. Each of the electrodes on their thread is separated by about 200 microns. This is because within the volume of 100 by 100 by 100 microns, you have about 40 neurons that you may be able to individually detect using spike sorting algorithms. There's a whole field dedicated to this. But the point is that you can detect in this little volume of multiplied by the 1,000 channels that they have access to, all of these individual neurons and their spiking activity. And you can use it for something, right? So when I really say we have access to the biological neural network, this is the level of detail that we have access to, action potentials of individual cells. Whoops. Sipping a coffee here.
Yeah, so you've made an interesting point when, actually both of you, when you're talking about a person incorporating an AI or a device to their identity and the ethical aspects of this. I see it as a philosophical question, because in philosophy, when you have the philosophy of the mind and you want to describe a mind and what is reality, there's a point where your tool, your pen, becomes a part of you for the simple reason that it enables you to write. And while you are using the pen, even if it's just a pen, the pen is part of you at that moment. So saying that you are using a brain implant for tinnitus or for cochlear implant or whatever, or that you are using an AI, which is more abstract, you go back to the same philosophical question. Do you accept the idea that yourself is defined by what you are able to do by that pen extension? So I would call it philosophical firstly, and then ethical. It's ethical to the point that what do you accept as ethical? There was an entire course on the philosophy of the mind and the definition of truth. Truth, beliefs, anything that is ethical at this point is most likely not going to be ethical or true in the future when things change. Can you still say that your ethical decision today was a correct one? Was it ethical? So it's always such a slippery ground, I think. But I find ethics at this point as one of the most challenging parts of neuroscience. It's very hard to untangle. You want to regulations, you want to talk about GDPR and privacy. The thing is, in 20 years, you might not have GDPR, you might not have the ADA. Will your truths that you have said today still be true? And so it's so slippery. And now they are emerging here in Europe, neuro legislation. For me, it's a field that is perhaps one of the most challenging. It's the same thing they did when they started to regulate AI. But truth is always a very, very slippery thing. There are many, many truths and many, many ways to define it. I was working, one of my pet projects is a language of the mind, a grammar of the mind, in fact. And I draw on Davidsonian philosophy because you have to have truth and you have to define concepts. So truth is, we don't know what it is. There are many truths.
Well, in our country here in the States, in our Constitution, we have something called the elastic clause, which allows for expansion or tailoring concepts to the needs of the future, and which will eventually be the present. And that type of concept may be important in drawing up, legislation now for the ethical dilemmas and such that may arise with, these neurotech innovations in the future. Just that since some of those things are in the hypothetical stage now, but they are going to become realities because of the commitment and the investment and the scientific minds that are brought together to make these things happen. It's probably important to lay out parameters, but then also have something similar to that elastic clause that we have in our Constitution here. So, it can be flexible as to what the upcoming situations will be. And it's hard to forecast what these new things will be, but I know Susan has given us a glimpse with the, with the idea that someone had that implant in them and that implant was a part of them. And my adopted sister has the cochlear implant. And
that's a great example. Yeah. That's a real, the biggest success story people forget about. That's been around since the 1980s. Yeah. And it's been, but it's not been without its ethical dilemmas. I mean, when it was first introduced, a lot of people in the deaf community were very upset by the introduction of this. They saw this as a threat to their deaf culture.
Yeah, that's another thing.
And so that was an ethical dilemma that was early on in the adoption of something that's been massively successful, the cochlear implant.
Well, that's another thing that interests me, because when you brought up when you use the word deaf culture, society has become more accepting of differences. And so so telling someone we'd like you to be normed. Not everyone is embracing norm, and we're sort of accepting that we're all a little different. I mean, I know a lot of people who are neurodivergent, who are really not interested in making us taking medicines or whatever to become normative. They're like, there's a lot of really good attributes to being neurodivergent. Yeah.
100%. And if we think like some of our greatest scientists have been neurodivergent, and that's what's allowed them to make the discoveries they've made. Why there's this push around forcing people into a normative culture? I don't understand.
Yeah. So yeah, but you did intrigue me with a lot of what you brought up, because it should be elective. It should not be enforced, and I can sort of see scenarios because I know, like in some of the school districts here, they were trying to enforce psych meds on kids that were a little ADHD or otherwise, and but a lot of the parents were saying, I would rather my child learn how to live with and adapt for different circumstances, with his difference, than have some company sort of teach him how to get a chemical habit.
Yeah, I mean, so like neuromodulation, it takes many forms. It's not just devices. I mean, a great example would be the amphetamines for ADHD, and of course that's been life-saving for a lot of kids where this is an extreme disability. So let's not just think that. But the idea that it's also a way of getting kids to conform to the classroom norms is a problem. Yeah, we don't need to do that. So I often wonder, and a lot of times I think that's driven by parents that want their kids to fit in some mold. And I don't know how we get away from that. But I always worry that if we were to get a neuromodulation device that could, I don't know, increase SAT scores, which parents are going to be the first in line to force their kids?
Well, that's where Adderall became so popular. I mean, Adderall was known as like the study drug, and and people were impressed by how their child could calm down and focus and study. And so it became in demand in a lot of zip codes, where the kids were encouraged to be super achievers. But then, there's nothing that you put into your body that doesn't have a side effect or a consequence, let's face it. And so, I think a lot of people in the early stages of these medications being released were just jumping on it to stay competitive. But then later on in the road, you realize, what does 10 years of Adderall do to someone, and I'm not calling them out specifically, but there's a whole class of SSRIs and stuff.
I think we have to look at the root cause of that, and that's the extreme competition to get into the best schools. And maybe we have to have a hard look at why we're putting that kind of pressure, because that's what's leading to that race, right?
There's a couple of nuggets of information I wanted to sprinkle. We were talking about SSRIs. Specifically, let's take Neurotech devices. There has been a controversy many of you are probably aware of in China by using Boehnke, the EEG recording device, in classrooms. And Nina Farahadi is one of our central arguments of like when tech goes bad. It started in the classrooms, been used in workforce for monitoring and penalization, really, right? So it feeds back into this cycle of overachievement. I also have a few thoughts, I don't know if it's appropriate, about what Violeta has been talking about with a philosophy of mind. And we can go all the way down to the fundamentals of that and then come back into governance. But I'll defer to Milena for now and see if that's where you want to go.
Yes, because we also, but thank you, Sam. And, I would like to continue maybe in our also future meetings like this. I think that's great that we're discussing, everything in depth. But I would like to hear right now from each of you so that you would share with our listeners what is your current project? What are you working on? I think that's something very important for us also to hear. Maybe briefly, not going into much details, but can you give an overview? Who would like to start? With the most current project? Some maybe you can, because you definitely are working on something very interesting. Yes, with your avatar.
We want to hear about
Yes,
uCat.
Of
yes.
course,
We're
I can
all
go.
curious. Yeah.
I will start with a very careful short statement, technical one, about what we do, and I can peel off the layers and we can work out how that really fits. So uCat is a software stack that's turning the motor cortex into the highest resolution input device. That's really what it is. We're transforming brain signals into an input device. And you can use that input device to control all kinds of equipment, all kinds of devices. Currently, the hypothesis is that some of the devices people would really like to control are not within reach due to technical immaturity. So I will make this very clear. We have so the prefrontal we have precentral gyrus, along which most of the somatotopy of the human body is represented. So there's this mapping between there's a correlation between this neural activity in various of those sub areas along the precentral gyrus and parts of the body. There's the hand knob area. It's been the area of implantation for many of these electrophysiology studies, and continues to be an interesting target for the first population of users. Population, say, of people with severe spinal cord injury, stroke, ALS, cerebral palsy. Different etiologies that lead into severe paralysis eventually. And so this area, if we tap into it, allows us to map out a highly dimensional signal of the hand, of the biomechanics of a hand, of how you're going to control your individual arms, the 27 joints that you have on your hand. I think it's around 60 for both upper extremities. And so the question is then, okay, we have this signal. What do we do with it so it's most useful to the end user? And if this is one of the first targets, along with area 6V, which is where speech is being produced, what do you do with perhaps these first two targets? Well, let's focus on the hand. What people would really like is to minimize people with severe paralysis, to minimize the cost of care or minimize the care that's required for their activities of daily living. This is probably not a full statement. It's still a hypothesis, yeah, and there's different clinical studies looking into the clinical outcome measures of what is really important for this first patient population. But let's assume that a huge spend around $200,000 a year goes towards having almost full-time, non-stop supervision that of a carer that takes away your privacy, your independence, almost all of your expressivity. And if we could minimize this with a person who can control something that allows them to remove this profession, this person from their life and become more independent, that's great. Now, what would that be?
So, it's about restoring dignity,
restoring
right?
dignity. I say restoring agency as the biggest kind of top level outcome. So what people would like to do for that, it would be they would like to control their own arm.
Yeah.
That's really at the top of the leaderboard there. I'd love to have control over my own arm back. Unfortunately, we can talk about the different technologies that do stimulation of different parts of the nervous system to achieve that. They're generally classed as neural bypasses. They are not clinically mature to go out at the same time as these brain-computer interfaces are going to come out, or these recording devices. The second best thing, perhaps, would be something along the lines of a robotic arm that's mounted on the wheelchair. So now you can at least do activities around the house. Perhaps you can feed yourself. You can do some hygiene activities. Important things, right? You get some sense of agency back. But these systems, these robotic arms, are also very difficult to build. I said earlier that there is 27 degrees of freedom in a human hand. This is the most degrees of freedom in any like area or volume of the human body, and it's really hard to try to make these arms so that the contact forces actually make you be able to interact with the physical reality. It's really difficult. I mean, there are some solutions, but they're so expensive. An arm like this is estimated to cost around $100,000 to $150,000. It's way beyond what people can reimburse, what the agencies can reimburse. Okay, but let's assume that eventually the economies of scale are going to make these devices more available. Well, and here's where uCat comes in. We said, okay, maybe in the future we can be this interface that takes signals from the brain and puts them on the robots, but at least until then, you can try to test drive and develop algorithms that allow you to control that kind of hand in virtual reality to begin with. It's a sandbox, it's a stepping stone, and where nothing breaks if you make mistakes. And eventually, as these physical technologies mature, we can have people embody these robotic arms. Hell, they can embody whole body avatars that help them get around the house. But the stepping stone is to start with the simulation, then work your way up from there. So our current product that we're trying to get to market is, I guess, twofold. First, we're scaling up motor BCI studies by having people wear virtual reality headsets where they can see a shadow of their physical body, and that shadow moves. People are trying to mimic that movement in order to entrain these machine learning decoders, and we can have them mimic all kinds of complicated simultaneous movement and get a very clean label as to what is the neural correlate of that movement, because it feels like it's your arm. In virtual reality, these are my arms. So that's the kind of preclinical product, or I would say the R&D product. But then the product for the end user is that once these devices come to market and they're generally available, well, if you could control your virtual arm and you could also control your other virtual arm, and we could decode some aspects of orofacial movements, or maybe even speech, maybe even facial movements, we can do something called inverse kinematics and map all of these data points onto a full body avatar like the one I'm in right now. And you no longer are paralyzed, at least in the virtual world. I think that's meaningful quest to pursue. So the hypothesis that people would find quite a lot of value in being able to embody these virtual avatars, perhaps meet their loved ones without appearing to be paralyzed, go back to their professions. There's a lot of work that's being already done from within the metaverse. We can peel back those layers as well, and get some of their agency, some of their life back through these avatars until more roboticized products become more generally available. That's what we're doing in a nutshell.
That's
so
cool.
I have a couple questions, comments, please. Yes.
So how much co-creation have you done with people with paralysis and stroke and other disorders or disabilities, about whether they'd be willing to adopt this and what they would be willing to have it look like? So that's the first one, because one of the things that I learned from the example of Second Sight when I was at the BCI Society was that part of the challenge, was assuming that everybody would want to adopt the technology, when in fact only 10% of the total number of people they thought were going to adopt it actually did, or were actually willing to. When they went and asked after the fact, people were not interested. Yep. So I wonder about that. But number two question was, is this going to be like a virtual trainer? Because this was the other thing that was an unexpected cost burden in the Second Sight trial, from what I've read, was that it was very expensive to train people how to use this device, and that required sort of daily one-on-one sessions with somebody to train them to use their implant. And I think it's the same thing in a lot of the BCI implants. It's just it's very time-consuming and expensive, frankly. So having a virtual guide, is that what uCat is at some level, a virtual therapy trainer?
What I've described this until now is what we call the uCat system, but uCat is a anthropomorphic avatar of a cat, and it's pre-trained with all kinds of useful exercises in order to calibrate these decoders. So I'll take the second question first. For
Yeah.
the R&D product offered to these BCI companies, this is indeed what we're after. So I guess I'll segue from here into the patient advocacy, patient research, user research work. But it's been clear that there is a lot of burden on participants in these trials. Just for illustration, the best performing speech BCI, I guess it's still to date, I guess we can lump it into one, is from Frank Willett's lab at Stanford, able to decode about 65 words a minute from a huge vocabulary of 125,000 words, from a person who has anarthria. They cannot speak anymore. But to train this decoder in the first instance, they had to repeat over 10,000 sentences. So these were long hours, long sessions, multiple hours every day for about 25 days. That's a lot of focus you have to have. And during that time, the participant was surrounded by, I think it was at least 3 different research associates of the lab. And this doesn't scale, right? You need to do phase 2, phase 3 clinical trials with hundreds of participants. This is why we have the avatar. The avatar automates it. It also ensures that the instructions are the same between participants. And so progressively, we introduce more complex motor and speech tasks in our demo. And the demo is available. When I'm done talking, I'll send a link into the chat about how it looks like. Now, on to the first part, which was how do we do user research? It all started with an interview I did with Ian Burkhardt. And progressively from there, we built it up. So Ian was so informative, so switched on. He's a BCI pioneer, a user of a single Utah array system for, I believe, about 5 years. He has now explanted it. Maybe it's even 7 years. So one of the longest research participants, in fact, working on what I said was an immature technology earlier, which is this neural bypass. So he had a functional electrical stimulation on his forearm that allowed him to perform different gestures as he was imagining them. And he gave us a bunch of notes. This was an awesome interview that led to a long collaboration and design of the system effectively hand in hand with Ian. This was the first version of it. Then the other organization we've closely worked with is the Scott Morgan Foundation in the UK. Now, Scott Morgan Foundation. So Mr. Morgan was a engineer, I think a robotic engineer, professor at a prominent university in the UK, and he was diagnosed with ALS. And he made it his life's mission, unfortunately as short as it was, to try to engineer away all the issues of ALS, progressively replacing different organs as they began to fail, recording his voice into a voice bank, recording his likeness into an avatar. This was a 2D avatar. And then as he could no longer speak due to the progressive nature of this disease, he would speak through the avatar with his loved ones, right? And so he became a pioneer of with self-representation through technology as the body began to fail. Unfortunately, in 2022, he passed away, but the foundation remained. And you can think of them, if you're more familiar with the US context, as the who's the famous NHL player, or rather, who had ALS? I'm just blanking on a very important. Gleason, sorry, Team Gleason. So Team Gleason Foundation is also yet another one that significantly supports R&D efforts in assistive technologies for ALS. This is a close equivalent of that, or kind of a sister foundation in the UK, and they informed a bunch of the more contextual. So I'll give you an example. I thought that the motor cortex is so powerful that we could just use it and access to it to decode about 80 degrees of freedom that would be enough to embody a whole avatar. And that was kind of the mission, and it made it really concrete, but it was also difficult because it's a lot of parallel movements you can do at the same time. These decoders, they have to be resilient to environmental distractions, fatigue, other mental entangled states that are represented in that neuropopulation. It was a difficult challenge. And then they just, the Scott Morgan Foundation just gave me this tip, is like a bunch of the patients, they're not all the same. They're not all physically paralyzed to a level where they need all 80 degrees of freedom to be decoded. There's a lot of residual movement that's still present. So part of our system design then became how focused on how we can incorporate the residual movement as much as possible, how we can leverage the residual movement to say, if I can lift my arm at least this way, and I have a one-dimensional input which is closing and opening over my fist, that's great, and we should use that signal above the signal that comes from the brain. It kind of seems like a no-brainer. This is what we should have thought of but didn't. So I want to stress how important it is to work with the communities. And then, okay, if there are some tasks that require a pinch gesture or require, I want to give you a thumbs up or peace sign or something else, maybe something more derogative, that's what we can decode. Those are the aspects that we should only when necessary tap into the brains. And that's just an example of one of the good tips we received from the community. I think nowadays the biggest input that's being received is actually from the IBCI-CC consortium. I want to plug them. So this is the IBCI collaborative community, which is represented by many, if not all, of the motor BCI companies, many patient advocacy groups, as well as the FDA themselves. And together there is a number of working groups, I think 5, that work on different aspects of introducing this technology into clinics. Yes, in a reliable, useful manner, highly performant, useful manner. And so I would really recommend people to check out the IBCI-CC. I'll also, in addition to the demo, post a link to their community in the chat.
Yeah. No, I just looked it up. I saw a reference to them at the BCI Society.
Someone posted something that I had actually planned to talk about earlier. When I was doing my research, I did look into neuro reverse engineering, and I found studies about phantom limb sensations and how you can untrain the brain from that with, using mirrors, and how that was just really fascinating to me. And I just wanted to say hello to whoever posted that and a LinkedIn user there. That was a fascinating experiment and area of research. And that could be some way that we sort of use the brain to untrain or retrain parts that have been immobilized or damaged through disease or through brain injury.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sam. Thank you.
Oopsie. I hope you're okay over there, Milena. You're kind of frozen in time.
Whoops. Yeah, I think I can, in the meantime, quickly address what you mentioned.
Thank you.
I don't really have a good sense on the rejuvenation therapies for the patient population that is being considered for this motor BCIs that I'm talking about. Part of the issue is that it's a very heterogeneous patient population. There's very many different kinds of etiologies of diseases that have led to their state of being severely paralyzed. And different therapies work differently with different success. There is work from, I can't remember the name of the company. It's another startup, so just to show you how immature it is. It's a very young startup that works on stem cells that regrow damaged spinal cords. And I've recently seen a demo of a mouse that has a completely severed spinal cord being able to move around. This was huge. I can also send a link to that. But these are mouse studies, preclinical research. Let's anticipate another 5 years before they can be even tried in humans. Perhaps it's faster. It depends. But I'm not an expert on this area. But I'm kind of working on this assumption that that there is a patient population to begin with, the locked-in state patient population, who really have lost control over their body, but they are lively in their minds, just as you and I, who for whom the therapies do not work to restore their functioning.
Mhm.
In that case, what is the best way to replace their functioning? And I think the replacement over restoration is their only hope. Yeah, in some cases.
I think an important point would be assisted suicide, because when you're talking about locked-in people and other forms of cognitive decline, you might want to give them agency over their own life, over their own body. So maybe they do not want to spend another 10 years trapped in a bed with minimal functioning and having to rely on others and grant access to their finances and especially to their right to live. But they cannot express themselves. It's what, eye blinks. So if you want to do an assisted suicide, then you do need the security for it. You need the capacity to do a brain signature to escape that prison type body. But if that happens, one, the signature should be secure. Two, it should, okay, does the mind exist over there? So that's why it's important to decode the mind. Because if you have some functions, okay, they are breathing, there's something, but is that mind intact? Is there discernment? Are they emotional? Are they too medicated? How much of a consciousness is a consciousness?
It was interesting when I worked at nursing homes, there were people that had complete strokes, and for a long period of time, we assumed could not hear or understand or anything in their environment. And there were just a few isolated incidences when these people, became communicative and more cognitive sort of later to us. And they were able to tell us everything that was going on. And, a lot of the nurses, or people who would attend to their rooms would assume they could say anything in front of these people and that they weren't hearing it or feeling it or anything like that. But that really was not the case, because some of these folks, when they did were able to communicate later, they said to me, that nurse is mean. I mean, she used to come in here every day and tell me I smelled bad or whatever. And so sometimes you can assume that somebody is completely out and not able to understand or comprehend. They may just not be able to communicate back at that time. But all of them were very alert and aware and remembered things and knew things that happened. Like one of them knew the day that we had a tornado and we had to move all the patients into an isolated, safe area. They were completely assumed to be not able to understand anything around them at that time.
Yeah, that is always a tragedy when people are speaking in front of people because it's assumed they actually don't understand or care or speak for them. You see that. I have a son with intellectual disability and autism, and I sometimes catch myself in conversations with people right in front of him. And it's like, no, wait, let's have him answer for himself.
Welcome back, Elena.
But the idea is these implants could potentially give that person the ability to actually communicate in real time.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. So, which is really the goal. I guess one thing I would think about, is again, back to the users. So I noticed in your white paper, Sam, that you talked about there being, I can't remember the stats now, but 1 million people with locked-in syndrome around the world or something like this. You had a number of stats. And the question is still, is that population based, given that, maybe a very small portion of that would ever be able to actually, for various reasons, access a BCI.
You're hitting on
when do we get to what is the actual and yet we've had $2 billion worth of investment in from all these companies. So is the end goal really just to just treat people with severe cases of ALS or paralysis?
Yeah, I don't think that's the case, unfortunately. I think this is one of, if not the biggest critique of the strategies and of the presentations of these high bandwidth BCI companies, that the patient population, the market is just too small if we consider a
Hmm.
locked in state population to begin with. I then go on and say, so I cite WHO and their numbers to say that there's 21 million people worldwide that are restricted to a electric wheelchair with postural support.
Mhm.
So it's still a form of severe paralysis or at least movement restriction.
Mhm.
And in parallel, there is around 100 million people with severe dysarthria, inability to mechanically pronounce words, so while they can still make them up in their mind. So no aphasia. And this is kind of the patient population where the market numbers start to make sense.
Yeah.
But here we introduce this extreme heterogeneous patient population, heterogeneous in terms of etiologies. And in the locked-in state, 55% or so are due to ALS, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. It's just a progressive neurodegenerative disorder. Slowly you lose function over all of your body, just like Mr. Scott Morgan. And so the rest is there's also a big proportion of that which is a severe stroke in locked-in state. But then when you go to these 21 million people, it really becomes many different categories of acute injury, spinal cord injury, say, or stroke, to progressive these debilitative conditions. And so to design a product that suits them all is a big hurdle. The way that I'm looking at it personally is to say, because again, I want to make sure that the end user gets what they need the most. And at the moment, if the product that we see from Neuralink and others is to control a cursor, I don't think that that's something that they need that much. I mean, yes, from the brain, the signal that you get is maybe 10, 20, 30% better. It's a bit more reliable than what you get from eye tracking. But if you still have access to your gaze, you can use eye tracking, which is ubiquitous. Since
Yeah.
iOS 18, it's
Yeah.
been on all of the devices that Apple have put this operating system
I
on.
did eye tracking for
It
my
costs
postdoc.
$1,000 otherwise.
Yeah.
Right, so at $1,000 you can get a Tobii eye tracker instead
Wow.
of no invasive open brain surgery, instead of the 60,000 that you pay for a Neuralink and one device.
Well, exactly.
So
I always wondered why wouldn't everybody just use eye tracking in this case? And they
there
do.
are some cases where it works better. For instance, you can't really use eye tracking outside, and you know we can talk about those cases as well. But the argument that I'm making is that eye tracking affords you control, low dimensional control. So like 2D control, maybe if you stare long enough at a letter of a alphabet or like a keyboard in front of you, it does a click. And I know people like Sutherland, escaping his first name, who wrote the whole book when they had ALS using eye
Yeah.
tracking. So
Yeah.
it's possible to use this for
Mhm.
other purposes. But what eye tracking does not let you to have is any more degrees of freedom or any more dimensions of this input signal that I keep talking about,
Yeah.
of this input device, right? And but the brain computer interface does, and it can parameterize the whole hand, the biomechanics of a whole hand or whole upper body, or multiple effectors. We've seen that
Mhm.
work from, again, Willett's group in 2021, being able to discriminate between 32 different effectors of the body, rather. So these could be effectors of individual ankles or knees or hip movement. And so if a patient was trying to move these particular effectors, it could correctly classify with very high accuracy distinguish between these 32 different classes of movement. And so, imagine that we can continue scaling this up. This was done with a research device, limited research setting. Imagine where we can go with this. And that's where I think we should be thinking about is, okay, what happens when we have this highly dimensional signal coming out of the brain about your intended movement or intended speech? What do you do with that that's really beneficial? And if you can prove that it can generate what we call quali. I don't want to go into that, but if it can generate enough value for the end user for justifying its reimbursement, it can actually scale. It can scale to these dozens of millions of people And in fact, it can scale even beyond that. There are around 350 million people with some form of paralysis, some
Mhm.
form of paralysis that restricts their movement. Perhaps in the future that becomes the market as well, right?
Mm.
It depends on how invasive these technologies are. And this is another thing we can definitely go into, is like, just because something is invasive, it doesn't mean it's the same level of invasiveness. There are so many different scales to judge this upon, and I have different preferences. We can delve into different implant designs and modes of administration, but I just don't want to go that route immediately. Just to say that there is a huge patient population that is movement restricted or speech restricted. So 350 million people, perhaps physically mobility restricted due to paralysis. It's about 1.7% of Americans, in fact.
Mm.
And around 100 million people who are speech restricted. So they cannot use mechanically their speech apparatus, which is composite of about 100 different muscles that are involved in pronunciation. They can't control them very well. So perhaps this will become the market, but we have to figure out what is really valuable for these people to be able to do if we have that access to all of these degrees of freedom.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sam. I don't want to interrupt you, but we also have other panelists and we want to hear from them. But thank you so much. And I hope we will continue this conversation because there's so much to discuss. Who would like
Milena,
Yes.
while you were away for a moment,
Yes.
Violeta actually started describing very briefly part of the research that she's working on to do with deciding how. You had a nice concept around this. Perhaps that's a good segue. Having an
Yes.
active brain signature to decide whether assisted suicide is the right choice or not. And I thought I would bring that up because I think it's relevant here as the
Yeah.
perhaps next speaker.
Yes, please. Who would like, if Violeta or who would like to talk about their current project? But let's try to keep it within 5 minutes because we will need to finish in less than half an hour. Who would like? Violeta, if it's connected, yes, to what just Sam was talking about.
Well, yes, I mentioned assisted suicide. Basically, other than opening a market, brain signatures are very much necessary in certain contexts right now, which are dictated by, call it, global political choices and trends, but also, ethical considerations. The autonomy over one's body, being free to live or die, being able to have financial agency. And also, since Susan was mentioning autism, right now there's a trend to introduce online examinations. If you want an online examination for a university or a school, then that kid needs to sign and also needs to be in front of the laptop continuously, so continued presence. The problem is that with the brain, you are giving continuous evaluation. So when you're talking ADA, when you're talking profiling, while your kid is doing an online exam, your kid is also getting profiled by the institution, by the government, by taxes, and by the bank, and by the wherever that data is going. So that's why you need secure brainwave authentication so that your kiddo can safely use an online exam without erroneously or correctly being profiled by their future university saying, oops, you're a bit autistic. You're too autistic for us. You never know when that happens. You never know how the world is going to evolve. We've heard some statements in the media and the press from certain politicians, no more comment, but they exist. So right now, the mind and what is said about your mind is exactly the same as what can be drawn from you from Facebook, from your social media, from everything else. It's an area that needs to be protected, that needs ethics, but also very, very secure, very trustable authentication. Not just to log in, but also to prove and to say, no, I am not this. So this is my current project. I'm taking it from academia after 5 years of Leuven and Bart Perennial. Now my project is sprouting legs and it's going more towards industry. So we are in the process of creating the infrastructure. The persons involved, we are not ready to go live, so I will still keep it quiet. But yeah, we're approaching a real authentication, real security of the brain, so that can also have freedom of the brain.
Any question? Thank you so much, Violeta. Any questions, comments, Susan, Dante?
Hi. Well, let me see. You asked what projects are we working on? Okay, so my current project is I am adapting the book series into a film or streaming series. And the book series, basically it's research scientists and the spies and thieves. We haven't spoken about them, but I'm sure you folks have dealt with people who try to snatch some ideas from you or borrow them or whatever. But my father was a research scientist, and we all know that there are folks out there who like to borrow or claim ideas for whatever their motivations. But the book series follows these 3 military research scientists. It starts out with the 3 of them, and they each have a separate discipline. They have to collaborate to make something to the military's specification. And new scientists come, new spies and thieves come. And so it's sort of a roller coaster between those 2 forces. But also the project needs to frequently be adapted because the times change and it requires adaptations to the new surroundings, the new technologies around and everything like that. One of the hopes I have from the series of the base, the book series that I've written, is that it will make science cool again and that it will make people not fear it and that it will be something accessible and interesting to people, and people might want to noodle around with some of the ideas and it'll start discussions on that. I know that in some circles there is a very big race to be super achievers and stuff, but then in other circles there is people are kind of repelled by people who are what they perceive as overly intellectual or who have developed their minds. And, I'd like to erase that stigma. I'd like science to be cool again. I'd like people to think more and, toy around with ideas and research and experiment. I did, for 20-something years, I did all my experimenting in the kitchen. I worked as a baker pastry chef. So, so thinking is good. And sometimes you're lucky you can eat what you think. I mean, I know you guys can't really, eat the lab mice, or you don't want to. I understand that. But, they don't, I'm just joking around here. But, my father had his share of mice that he was, working with and other things as well. And you don't necessarily want to eat them, but I ate my experiments and I shared them too. But, I don't want people to fear thinking and fear experimenting and fear these upcoming technologies. I mean, there's good and bad that can come out of all of these things. Not everyone who gets into research has bad motivations or whatever. And, we just, there's so much potential and so much possibilities. The more research I did, it was just amazing to me how, we could see the end of paralysis at some time. We could see us learning, people with different levels of communication abilities communicating. And I saw that with my adopted sister when she got her cochlear implant, and she was legally blind before she went 100% deaf.
Wow.
So it really narrowed her entire world down so quickly. And she was able, we talk now and her voice is the same and everything. I mean, she was just able to sort of become one with that computer implant that talks to her brain. And she's even named it. And it's part of her, and it is part of her assistive technology, and becoming Alice again. This is just Alice 2.0, and so it really is. It's a great thing to see when you see people who really want that. And she still volunteers for a lot of the research and stuff with it, and because she wants to help others, who choose the path that she chose. And there's so many doors that can be opened with all this, and it's very encouraging. I know there's a lot of fear mongering and stuff on the news and stuff. Like, there's, especially AI is to some degree a villain for a lot of things. People sort of blame it for everything, but we have to, the people who have started a lot of the research, and I include all of you folks in here, you're not evil, diabolical people who are out to get us. I mean, you're looking at the potential there, and the potential to help others and to level out the playing field, and giving people like Alice the ability to hear and communicate with everyone. And now she's working, I mean, back in the workforce and everything. So for that, I thank all of you that you are part of all of that.
Yeah. I thank you for saying that, 99% of basic science researchers are not diabolical.
Yes.
We just are really in it to help people.
Yes.
To be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I have a few villains in the book, but they're the thieves. They're not the scientists,
I think it's interesting that we're increasingly getting neurotech sort of woven into novels and into writing. I just, by total fluke, for my book club this last week, had to read a novel called Camp Zero, which is sort of a dystopian future where climate change has ravaged America, and
right.
They're trying to start, a base camp up in northern Canada, basically. Anyways, but it turns out that really the secret reason is that they need to mine to get the rare earth metals to keep powering the Flick, which is a brain-computer interface. So that was I had no idea this book was going to be about that, but it was very bizarre. Anyways, Camp Zero is called. Anyways, you might be interested to see how she portrays.
Yeah, I'll see that. My series does have a lot more comic relief in it, because I do have a sense of humor. And and then, the silly parts, I mean, if someone tries to steal your idea, like when I worked in kitchens, like sometimes people would want to steal a recipe or something like that, but they would have really no idea how to execute it. So that always kind of gave me a snicker. But if people really try to, some of the spies and thieves, like if they try to steal a military device, they don't really think about, like, do you really want that thing in the back of your car? I mean, do you know what you would do if something went wrong with that thing in the back of your car? So, there's mine isn't exactly dystopian. It is sort of in some parts like a cautionary tale, like someone has this thing in the back of their car and they're like, uh-oh, what do I do now? And it looks like Sam is walking around there showing us the full
very cool
catwalk.
I thought for a little bit of comic relief, I would do a little bit of comic relief and show you how I get my brain-computer interfaces done.
Yeah, he's doing the catwalk.
Oh my gosh.
That's amazing.
There's some questions in the chat I was noticing, Milena. Should we address those?
Yes, we will. Maybe we will just listen to you, because at least I want to make sure everyone gets the chance to talk about your current project. I know that you have a capstone happening right now.
Yes, I can show a couple of slides just to show what that's about.
Yes, please.
Okay, all right.
Yes, and while you're preparing slides, Dante, there was here a message for you that work that you mentioned was inspiration to get into neurotech. So, and in general, very, very nice comments about.
Great. That's awesome.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yeah, we are. Let's use it.
And Dante, also, while this is being loaded up, I wanted to mention there's a person called Tim Dennison. He's from Medtronic and a very important figure in neurotech. But he kind of worked on these cochlear implants. He gave this awesome lecture saying that even one-channel cochlear implant, so like a one-dimensional discriminant of noise versus not noise, which was one of the
Right.
first generations of these devices, was immensely useful. For instance, he gave this awesome example of some patient that he knew for whom a one-dimensional cochlear implant allowed them to dance.
Wow, that's
First time
amazing.
they could go back on the stage and feel the sound, and I just wanted
Oh,
to
yeah,
share.
that would even just, yeah. One of the big surprises I think with cochlear implants is that you really could decode speech entirely from 8 channels, 8 frequency channels. And I think that's why they were so effective so quickly, and why it's so much harder to develop a retinal implant, for example.
Wow.
Yeah, so I just want to quickly talk about what our projects are right now. So of course I've got this Neurotech Microcredential Program, which is we're hoping fostering neurotech innovation through this program. I'm just sort of hop out. Really, the reason was that the challenge was, how do we create a transdisciplinary training program for neurotech, knowing that we needed people to understand the engineering, first and foremost, materials, electrical, computer, but also the neuroscience and the ethical things that we've all talked about today. And also, what does it take in this? We've also talked about this too, neuroentrepreneurship. What does it take to make a product? So those are a lot of things to cover, but if you cover them in some courses that fill in those gaps, I guess I'll highlight here. I don't want to take too much time, but so I just want to highlight some of my industry supporters. They don't really provide money, but they do provide feedback. So they've given staff to review the material. They also participate in the capstone project course in various ways, including being on a panel that can look at the students' projects at the end, and hopefully provide a pathway to internships or jobs for our graduates. So I'll just jump down. Those are just a very large leadership team. This was not just me. We hired a whole lot of people during the pandemic to help make these courses. So our first one is the Neuroscience and Neurotech Primer, which we've had over 110, 120 people go through. The neuroelectronic recording and processing, which is like electrical engineering for neuroscientists. Neuroimaging, ethical considerations in neurotech, neuroentrepreneurship. And now we've just finished our first module for behavior on eye tracking. It's very exciting. And we'll also talk about markerless motion capture and various things in there. And I've been working with a developer on brain-computer interfaces, and happy to talk to you about that, uCat, Sam. So they're modular-based. They are asynchronous, so anyone can join from anywhere, just pay as you go. And they're fully in a learning management system, a university, same one we use in our university for our undergraduate courses. And there's lots of formative learning assignments. We try to use open source, all open source software packages. So learners learn to use MRI viewers. That's how they teach themselves neuroanatomy and other software packages like SimNibs, when we talk about simulating neurostimulation. And they are fully assessed with quizzes and an oral final exam, which we have a blast doing. And there's just like a few examples of our Zoom sessions where we have our oral final exams, and then they get their badge at the end. Okay. So some stats on enrollment, but I'm just going to jump out to the capstone. So this is really the jewel. We wanted to be able to have people learn online, asynchronous, but then be able to come and actually get their hands dirty with equipment in our lab. To do so, we had to build a lab. But the 2-week capstone was envisioned as a sort of a long form hackathon or a neurotech boot camp. I work with students, 8 hours a day. We go out for dinner at night. They're staying in residence together. It was a very intensive experience last year when we had our first, and we're having our second one this August. And we had to build a space, and we got money from the provincial government of Ontario to build an innovative learning space where students, and we also populated it with cutting edge equipment so that students could learn in that context. And that's just some examples of the equipment we have, everything from various types of eye trackers to FNIRS with Nyrex. Nyrex has been a huge supporter. Markerless motion capture with Thea, markerless, of course, Muse EEGs, GTech EEGs, and our Galea, which is our virtual reality with integrated biosensing.
Wow.
And we use this lab in various capacities. I mean, the short form for hackathons, we're a host site for the GTech hackathons. And we're also do our 2-week capstone project course in the summer. That's for the Microcredential Program. And then for the school year, I use it. It's the Queen's Neurotech Discovery Lab. And this is how our health science and life science and psychology students do their 4th year team-based research project theses. So very flexible. They're just some examples of students. And that's our cohort from last year and 2024, which was success beyond my wildest dreams. I was still in touch with most of these people. We actually got a Mark Macaulay there. Where's Mark? Mark Macaulay is on the rock in the front there. It's a gentleman with Parkinson's disease who's a major patient advocate. He has a DBS system, and he was very curious in how changing DBS parameters, such as the frequency of pulses, differentially affected his gait and his speech. And he wanted to objectively characterize that in our lab using this equipment. It was an incredible experience. So we'll do this again in August 11th to 22. We've got a bunch of students signed up to come. And this month we've been ideating what their projects might look like. It's been very exciting. So if anybody's interested in this, reach out to me over LinkedIn. I can tell you about how to join.
Cool.
Yeah. I guess that's just some examples of projects, but I don't want to take any more time. I'll let everybody read.
Yes, thank you. As we're nearing towards the end, maybe each of you can point some opportunities that you see currently for people interested in neurotech. Any upcoming workshops, conferences, maybe even job hiring that you are aware of, so that people can actually take action and start doing something in this space. Of course, everyone can join, first of all, Susan's Microcredential Program. Yes. So
one thing that I'm excited about is the BCI World BCI Forum that's coming up. I'm going to try to find the link for that. That is free. And there's some major people speaking at it.
Some minor people as well.
And you as well. I saw. So I think we should encourage everyone. That's coming up. I'm just trying to find the date.
It's the 17th, 18th, 19th
of this month, right?
Of July.
We will post the link
just in 2 weeks' time.
Thank you. Yes, Dante, Violeta, Sam.
Well, what I'd really like to do is promote what you're doing, the Neurocareers Roundtable, because I'm an author. I write books, and my books I'm trying to transfer into the film streaming and such. And I derive a lot of my inspiration from all of these great scientists here, but in other fields that I had to research for my books. And so without the scientific community and the neurocareer scientists, people like me, authors, like, we would probably write something down in a book and it wouldn't be factually accurate or wouldn't withstand the scrutiny of a real scientist. And we don't want to be one of those people that everyone else just says, writer's a joke. I mean, they didn't do any research. So thank you for shining the light and bringing out the truth in all of this.
Yeah, if there's authors out there, who want to run run their ideas past neuroscientists. I wonder if there's a way we could facilitate that. Like, I think about this book that I just read. I'm like, if I could have just talked to that woman, I could explain to her why that wouldn't have worked the way she thinks it works.
Well,
given the way they said that it was placed. But they didn't get a lot of details on the device. But
well, if we get into film production and stuff, I'll be reaching out to you guys, because I want to make it accurate. Hoping to. Yep.
Yes, thank you so much, Dante, for mentioning that. And for everyone who is listening, we will have another event, of course, in August, the first week of August. So please join us. And if you're interested in joining us as a panelist, if you have something to share with others, please also let us know. And we are always inviting people in early stages of neurocareers. So please don't hesitate to reach out. Yes, thank you. And actually, also, we're adding all this information usually in our newsletter. So I will post a link to our newsletter. Please subscribe, and you will always know what is happening in Neurocareers. So thank you. Thank you very much, Dante. And Violeta, what can you recommend?
I don't feel I'm old enough to have the wisdom, so I'm going to take the wisdom from my ex-promoter. I think the way he described me was that the best thing I can do better than break rules is pick up a fight. And he was right. And I think this is very important in research. I've meditated over my own work. And if anything, my core value that I would, I don't know if recommend, but propose to younger neuroscientists or people who start their path would be to do groundbreaking research. Bart told me time and time again that making papers that are boring and banal, that are just considerations of consideration or repeat something that is happening in 200 other labs is absolutely unacceptable. Don't do it, cool it. So my only recommendation is absolute excellence, profound passion, devotion to science, and to me, I see research as a symphony, as something you craft from pieces to get coherence. This is how I create my research. I don't focus on speed. I definitely don't focus on rules of any sorts. I break them when I see them. I focus on excellence. So my research is built to change the discourse, to change the game. And I don't know the global impact. As researchers, we're always confronted with the fact that we're a drop in a big bucket. But I think if all of us strive, that's how we should do it. It's the sheer passion for science. And sometimes we forget because we spend months and months on the same corridor in the same office. We do all the small things, and sometimes the passion dims. But you have to remember it. So this is what I was doing lately. I was meditating, and I don't know if I mentioned it earlier. I went to an antique shop, and I found a kapala. It's a Tibetan art object. Well, it's a skull bound in silver, which the Buddhists, they use it to invoke Kali. She's the goddess of shredding the veil of illusion. So it's illusions about yourself, illusions about others, and it's about the authenticity of what you produce. So I felt it was a bit meaningful because lately I've been reigniting what I felt 10 years ago when I decided to start research and to start not only neuroscience, but cryptography on top of it. So that's what I recommend young people, to grab a skull bound in silver, down on their knees, wine or blood, whatever they want in it, and go for the toast, go for it. I'm doing it later.
Oh,
We lost Milena again.
your speech was so inspirational, Milena.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it a lot. I actually would love to see this
Have
instrument
some blood.
and invoke Kali myself. Get rid of all the layers of protection from fear of death and other constructs that I inhabit. But in the spirit of that question of how do we kind of point people listening to this to some resources, I want to say that Yeah, I was quite moved by this capstone project of yours, Suzanne. This is awesome. It reminds me of the Cleveland workshop.
Oh, yeah, I
Jojo
haven't
and
been to
others.
neurodesign, but I keep hearing about it. And
I
one
just
of
wanna say-
the girls that was in my capstone last year went to Cleveland Neurodesign in the fall after, or later in the summer after she'd been in mine.
There you go. So it's all interconnected.
Very different. They're very
it-
different programs in that ours is very hands-on, actually do a project, and that is sort of a weekend of like super. It's supposed to be amazing, but it's very much just thinking through it, ideating the design. But I don't think they work with devices.
I see. Okay. Well, that's my mistake for trying to draw.
No. I think that I think they're very complementary
in spirit.
Yeah.
I want to point people to please DM me. I'm about to put out a call for proposals. These could be concept level startup ideas. It could be a pre-seed, seed stage startup ideas, specifically focused on two aspects: synthetic morphogenesis of a block of tissue, block of ideally cortical tissue, that we can highly control its morphogenesis, and we can implement perhaps some functions of a mind, and we can test hypotheses
Like
of
organoid?
theories of mind. In yes, exactly, like a three-dimensional big organoid. Or if you're building high band, or well, let's just call them high spatial temporal resolution neural interfaces, please reach out to me. I'm running a incubator in San Francisco. And so this would be amazing if you can go into our shared lab and exchange ideas. Even if you don't have anything that you're building, at least you can come as an advisor and help us figure out what are the right startups to incubate like that. I'm very sorry, but I have to drop off to my next call. I've really enjoyed meeting all of you, and please
I'm
send
the
my
same
regards
boat
to
in that I thought this was over at 1:30, but it's a delight to have stayed so long.
Bye-bye.
Okay, goodbye. Awesome meeting you.
Yeah. Is there anyone else in the audience that had any pressing last minute questions? Feel free to reach out over LinkedIn.
Yes, thank you. I'm sorry, my computer crashed.
No
but I'm back online. Thank you everyone for all the wonderful insights, and yes, until next time. Yes.
Okay.
It's great to meet you, Dante and Violeta.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Good to meet you both.
Lovely to see you again.
Awesome. Thank you.
Bye-bye.